I want everybody to know I'm not a careless person. I'm very responsible. When I'm not on vacation, Talia, you have to, like, give me some affirmation if that's the case.
I'm
Yes, I have like broken ribs. I have a black
validating.
eye. What?
Yeah. Huh?
I'm not even sure how.
What?
I'm kind of sure how, but I'm not sure.
Every morning there's a new, like, you and I were talking yesterday morning. It was just like yucking it up. And then all of a sudden you must have seen your reflection and you were like, oh my God, I have a shiner.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships.
Friends, we are taking a bit of a vacation week. And by vacation week, I mean Doug's having fun and I'm still doing all of my things. But do you remember Lia Lamella, who we were on her podcast just very recently? We did a little pod swap. So she was on ours talking about her incredibly brave experience moving through domestic violence into this brilliant career of going from being a medical esthetician to an electrician. And then she started this fabulous podcast called Sparky Life. And she wants to talk to all the people thinking about the trades, in the trades, re-narrating the stigma around mental health in the trades, being able
Not
to...
only that, but yeah, the gender pieces, the ways that women in that trade are treated differently. And so there's so many pieces of this conversation, Talia. And yes, I will reiterate that you are in cold Minnesota and I am in very warm,
Where are you?
sultry.
Where?
I think I'm in Key West.
Where are you?
I don't think I went on a jet ski to Cuba. I don't think I did. I was on a jet ski, but not to Cuba. And of course, we've had different eating experiences this week, etc. But we don't want to talk about all of that.
We actually do. Let's say we're on her podcast. We can't wait to show it to you. And now I'd like to talk about Doug and my parallel lives right now. And
we're going to talk, before we get into that, we are going to talk. I mean, she does address all these things. Do I feel distracted? Because, okay, I think I got some sleep. And I'm on the porch of my Airbnb, which is so beautiful. I've got a beautiful orange bracelet to match my, whatever this is. I lost a bunch of stuff. Anyway, here's what I want to tell you. This topic with Lia is so good. And it is interesting to me, Talia, how we went from having her on ours to and talking about a very, very serious domestically violent situation. And the experience was so deep and troubling and layered. And so I can't wait for viewers to be able to see that. But yes, when we went on hers, it was such an interesting thing. And I just want to say that one of the things that we get from her, we got a little bit of like questions that she wanted us to answer. Really troubling that we still live in that world, but we're going to also comment on that later as well. So what do you want to hear about my week? About how much lobster, how much scallops, how much shrimp I've had, fresh ceviche off the ocean.
Oh my God. I had a previously frozen cod and I made fish tacos in stale shells that have been on the dry Minnesotan grocery shelves for probably since 2021.
I'm going to go 2019. I bet that cod was old. It's freeze-dried. You know, we're in for anyone who knows Key West, we're living right now in the Truman Annex. And so I just walked down the street a little bit and all of a sudden I found this farmer's market and I walk up and this guy's got coolers just lining his booth, right? And I'm like, what do y'all got? And I kept looking at the screen and he goes, let me show you. And then he had me, his fish dip he had me do. He's like, I don't even put mayo in this. It was so fresh, Talia. but I had conch ceviche, and then I had shrimp ceviche, and then I bought some crab claws. They were like $10 a piece, by the way, but they're really delicious. And that was our
How
appetizer.
big is a claw? Is it like?
It's big. Let me see if I can make one.
And then from where to where? Is it like down to your elbow or just like down to your wrist?
No, it's really just the claw. So it's where the really good meat is.
I can't help but notice that your mornings start off so wholesome and healthy, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
Old Cuban coffee from the Cuban coffee queen.
Coffee. And then
what happens?
Evening, things shift a little bit in Key West during Fantasy Fest. And I start getting photos that's when I realize that you and I are really living very different lives right now, because I've seen things in your photos that I'm not sure I've ever seen in my life. And when you said most women are topless, but they're body painted, and you sent me some photos, was the body paint flesh colored? Because
no, those women that those pictures I showed you last night were not body paint women. I have to get you some other ones. There's men who body paint too. There was an incredibly just detailed guy who had body paint on his entire body. It is Fantasy Fest. For anyone who knows Key West, it's like a 10-day celebration here. There's a lot of activities, like Tutu Tuesday was last Tuesday, and you had to wear a tutu to get into the clubs. So of course, my buddy that I'm here with, we did wear tutus. Mine was blue, his was white. And we had a number of people want to take pictures with us, and we wore them actually Monday evening too. And people were like, "It's not Tuesday yet." I'm like, "Well, we're setting the tone." But there's like events, right, for this Fantasy Fest. But these body paint people, and I think most of them are done at tattoo parlors. And they are just the most, and I think they're done with an airbrush, I think it's called, but these are just the most beautiful things. I'm going to take some more pictures for you. And if I get permission to, and by the way, musicians everywhere too. And these musicians, I will tell you, are just amazing. Like we'll walk by a club or something and we'll hear somebody, we've just got to go see who it is because that voice is so amazing. One of my favorite reggae, Lou, I think he's called, best reggae band I've heard. I've had so much fun listening to them. We're following them around. Wow. I scared Lou, however. I saw him on the street and I said, "You," and he went, "What?" He had no idea who I was. And I said, "I've been looking for you. Where are you playing tonight?"
Did he start running?
No, he said, "I'm at the tomorrow night where I got this hat from because I lost my hat, my sunglasses."
What else did you
lose, Doug? I lost my phone. My buddy lost his phone. We've lost every possible thing. I don't know where they are. So
I mean, footloose and fancy free. And then I started getting messages on the FB that they thought, "Oh, I lost my phone." And that just made me feel really good because I must be the person that you call the most, or maybe I was at the top of your
every
list
day. I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. So, you know, what's interesting about that too, is I want everybody to know I'm not a careless person. I'm very responsible. When I'm not on vacation, Talia, you have to, give me some affirmation if that's the case.
I
have like broken ribs. I have a black eye. What?
Yeah. Huh?
I'm not even sure how.
What?
I'm kind of sure how, but I'm not sure.
Every morning there's a new, you and I were talking yesterday morning. It was just like yucking it up. And then all of a sudden you must have seen your reflection and you were like, "Oh my God, I have a shiner."
It was that. I woke up in the morning, I went into the restroom, the bathroom, and I, did my thing. And then I look in the mirror, I'm like, "Oh no, I have a black eye."
And how does that happen to you?
I'm not going to go into some detail here out of regard for all
because I picture you like wrestling with like sharks, conchs, crabs,
conchs.
Conchs
are those beautiful little pink, those big pink shells. But conch fritters we eat conch fritters almost every meal. My buddy's figuring out where we're going to go for lunch. I'm going to go to the seafood company for dinner with him tonight. So yeah, we're having a blast. But I'll tell you something, guys. This whole experience of jet ski down here, tell you this before I went. I've been to Key West a number of times before this, and you get to go out into the middle of the Atlantic. You get to go into but you see the mangroves that grow in the middle of the ocean. And then there's this sandbar that's like 3 feet high, and you just walk around this amazing sandbar that feels so amazing on your feet. I found a starfish the first time I did it. I did not find one this time. But certainly
your trip isn't over yet.
It is not over, but we have only 2 more days of our 10 days. I'm regretful.
And I just made you promise one thing, because
I did not die.
Yes, that I know how you extremely leisure. And I was like, Doug, we have so many exciting things on the horizon. Like, this is the beginning of the rest of our lives. You just need to not get eaten by a shark. This trip, do not die. And I think I told you that if you die, I would never forgive you and I would haunt you.
And then you'd hire Kaya. You'd hire Kaya, our psychic that's been on the podcast that we're doing, that's called We Are Not Fine. I do remember this.
I'm so proud of you that you still remember that.
It's called Weird. By the way, as one of my pool mates yesterday already wrote an email to our podcast.
And would you like to share what was in that email? It was like, let me tell you, I think I'm word for word.
What was it?
I'm just going to spell it. NKWXYZZZZZII exclamation point, like butt emoji. I mean, like, I'm not sure what you're doing over there, but we're getting a lot of really interesting messages from your new friends.
Yeah, he actually left the pool area and he said, I already emailed you. And I said, where? But I think we have a lot of new subscribers from Key West now.
We do. We do.
It just ballooned because I got the microphone at the clubs. I did not. I've gone up.
And my favorite part about you is, well, I've got lots of favorites.
You've got lots of favorites, Talia.
You are like a walking, talking marketer and manifester. Like, when we have exciting things happening in our lives and they're like potentially life-changing, I tend to be like, oh, I'll let people know if there's anything really to say. And now all of Key West is like wishing us luck on our next big adventure. And it's like, you're really making it happen.
And it was so much fun. The pool that's part of the living situation here in the Truman Annex group, it's a really huge kind of conglomerate of beautiful, beautiful places. But I will also say that, the pool, we literally walked down there and within a second, someone said, where's my psych eval? And I knew they were talking to me. And I'm like, I don't remember which person this is, but we had met them within a half hour of getting here at Sloppy Joe's. So we had so much fun. And then we sat with them. They are honestly, the nicest people. Again, for anyone who knows Key West, people are very loose and carefree and not judgmental, and everyone kind of lives together. The, utopic part of Key West that I really have to say is that, people who are gay, the LGBTQ community, as well as the straight community, we all blend really, really nicely here. Everyone is very, very sweet and free. And we've met some great friends that want to keep in touch. I've given several people my phone number, which may not have been the right thing to do, but we'll see where that goes.
Well, I guess we'll find out more next week.
We'll find out, and maybe one of them will own up the black eye and the broken ribs. I don't know.
You're like, who took my phone? Who gave me a black eye? Who ate my conch shell?
Who took my sunglasses? Who took my buddy's hat when I wasn't looking? We lost so many things.
And it also sounds like you lost that sticker on your forehead that said twat.
I do remember sending that to you last night. Did I send that this morning or last night?
It's all blending together.
I think it's somewhere in my bedroom. I fell asleep really quickly, and I think the twat. That's not a very nice word, by the way.
Friends, wish Doug the best of luck not dying in the next 48 hours. And without further ado, here is us on Lia Lamella's
My Sparky Life
podcast, where she is so brilliant and in her element. And I think you're really going to love it.
Yeah, I think so too. It's very heady. I love it.
Today on the Sparky Life, we have 2 amazing guests, hosts of the podcast We're Not Fine, Dr. Talia Jackson and Douglas Jensen. As you might know, I am passionate about the importance of mental health. I have been a part of NAMI, the National Association on Mental Illness, since the age of 12. Therefore, I am intent on breaking stigma in construction community around mental health. I have noticed throughout my journey becoming an electrician, a lot of my coworkers aren't open to the idea of mental health, counseling, and all the incredible things these practices can bring into your life. In the construction world, it's looked at as a weakness, which I can't wrap my head around, especially because to me, mental health is the same as physical health. Most people wouldn't look down on working out or eating the proper foods in order to make your body strong. Why is it that taking care of your mental health and your mind for self-growth, development, and creating resilience, why is that looked down upon as a weakness when it's so clearly a strength? Doug and Talia break down mental health topics on the episode today in hopes to reframe the conversation around well-being and support in the skilled trades. Therapy doesn't have to be about being in crisis or needing to fix. It can simply be for those that desire to further develop themselves. We all have negative messages we tell ourselves about our lives, our careers, etc. The mark of developing a healthy mindset is the courage to examine these messages and challenge them. So welcome with me, the professionals, Dr. Talia Jackson and Douglas Jensen. I tell a lot of my coworkers, about mental health and counseling, and because they're in construction, they're like, they don't want to. They're like, why? You think something's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me? Like immediately it's defense. And I'm like, no, it's just, if you love self-growth and you want reflection and introspection, like really having a counselor, a psychologist, having somebody that cares about the human mind and understands it and loves self-development and self-exploration, you can really excel quickly and discover things about yourself that you never knew. And whenever I tell them this, they're like, woo woo.
I know. I mean, there's such a stigma. I feel like so many people feel like it means I can't figure this out on my own. I have to tell my private problems to a stranger. No one can help me figure this out. This is my stuff. And what will people think of me? But like, if you think about the idea that it's just this like collaborative relationship where somebody who's probably seen everything there is to see, heard all the stories, here's what helps, what doesn't help, can put their heads together with yours. And all of a sudden there's this collaborative team that has a vision and ideas that are going to work for you. And it's sort of like, these are the secret weapons of people who are happy and successful. Is they can see their story not just as like, I'm stuck in the bottom of a well, but like, oh, I see where the choice points are. I see what can be done. And there's also maybe for the first time in my life, someone who actually cares about me, supports me, wants me to do well. And their only agenda is my well-being. I mean, like, you don't get that.
Yeah. This is also what I think though, Leah, like that's the beauty of We're Not Fine. Like, please write us because, you can ask anything and we will address it. We would love those questions. But I got to tell you, I think there's a different piece to this that's really important. I think when you approach somebody on this issue and you start talking to them about this stuff, I truly think people get kind of uncomfortable with what's really going on inside for them emotionally. Like, it's a vulnerable spot. So even asking him about it or suggesting it might be opening that canal a little bit of emotions. And I think people start to realize, okay, if I start talking, I'm going to start crying because everyone has stuff. Everyone has stuff to talk about, right?
Yes, everybody.
So Leah, the minute you said it, I'm like, I bet you like hit a target zone and he got uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, if I start talking about my stuff, I'm going to start getting really emotional. So
I think everybody's worry is that the floodgates are going to open 100%. And they will drown in it.
I think that's totally true.
Well, you hit the nail on the head because how this whole thing started was We're besties.
Lovely.
Shout out to stickers. Like
Stickers.
stickers.
Yep.
Okay. So he was, saying very sweet things like, this friendship means so much to me. You've really improved my life. Like being friends with you has elevated me and how I approach things and think of things. I love how you're so into self-development and your books. And I said, well, you're actually into self-development too. When we talk about philosophical things and we talk about construction and leadership and our skilled trade, you're very excited about it. Why don't you see somebody, like see a counselor? And then he got like, you think there's something like, wait a minute.
Like you saw him, Lia, like you looked at him directly, you saw him. And I think that vulnerability, by the way, what a lovely interaction you two have.
I love your friendship.
Yeah, it's so supportive and so loving and so kind. And how amazing, Lia, for you to suggest this for him. But that vulnerability is probably like the minute you put it on him, he's like, what, me?
Yes,
right?
yes.
And another
of course,
thing,
him.
I think about one way to think about this, and I'm all about the reframe, right? Because if people are really stuck in like rigid ways of looking at the world that aren't really serving them, it's always really good to have a reframe. But that like most people on their own without therapy are like fine, right? They're, surviving.
But we're not fine.
And we're not fine. That's our podcast. But that they're fine. They're surviving. They might be white knuckling it. They might be like stuck in some old patterns that like, not top priority. It might not be on fire, broken, bleeding. So like they're fine. But the alternative, like I feel like what you were saying is it's not just for people that are like circling the drain. It's kind of bumping up people that are surviving into actually thriving, which is something most people don't even think about. Like, yeah, this is okay, but what would great look like? What would healthy look like? What would great relationships look like? What would fabulous mental health look like? What would it look like if I was like really proud of myself instead of feeling really trapped or whatever it is? It's kind of like a little bump up from good to great.
And I would also say that even if people are great, I mean, I would say that therapy is also about maintenance. Therapy is also about making sure that you stay with your head above water. Like I think one of the things that's striking about my 28-year practice is that I've seen people for 28 years. Yes. And people are like, are they just not getting better? I'm like, no. That's not what they're... Lia, thank you for that amazing acknowledgement. Like, you know what that is. It's about continuing to grow. This is a lifelong experience. And so it isn't necessarily for someone who's in a crisis all the time. It's for someone who just wants to make sure that they are living the best life that they can, which might also be great already, but it can just kind of maintain that great. So I love what you just did in terms of acknowledging that.
One of my favorite comedians, she does a skit about this because she is brave and divulges her mental health. Wow. And she teases that she goes into the counselor's office and she's like, okay, so we think you have this. And she goes, oh, wait, so they're not the problem. I'm the problem. Right. It's obviously, in jest and all in fun. And then she goes into, oh, so now you want my credit card. So it's like this tease that, we're going to keep doing this and you're going to stay in this relationship, right?
Yep.
Well, one of like the most painful parts that I think people will struggle with in therapy is when they come in and they start talking about all of the other people and, how this person treats me this way and that person did this. And these people are all like disappointing me, frustrating me, they're mean to me, or they're ignoring me. Like, everybody is doing these things to me. And then if you have a good therapist, first, they'll join with you, right? They'll connect with you. They'll see all of your beauty and all of your goodness and all the wonderful things about you. But then if they're actually good, they're going to hold up a mirror lovingly and just out of curiosity. There's zero judgment. But if we can own our part
in why our lives don't feel great, that's the beginning of shifting your life. Because if your entire life you're pointing at other people, there's no room for you to feel like you have agency or you can change anything because you're just a victim. And so sometimes it is really painful to have to look in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I do this thing, or I keep on ending up in the same relationship, or why am I always disappointed and frustrated? You know, just like the self-awareness is the beginning of being really healthy and happy, but it's hard.
Yeah. And I think what you need to focus on is when you find a counselor or therapist that has people that have been with them for 28 years, you need to ask yourself the question, wow, if it wasn't working, if they weren't improving, would they be there for that long?
Right.
Right. That's really where it's at.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to keep paying for something that doesn't work. Okay. It's not.
Absolutely. And yeah, Leah, I hope not. Right. Like,
Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. I hope not. And I also think that truly, I've always said this, if everybody had a therapist in the world that they met with every week, the world would be a better place.
I think
would, you know, where like we would just be a happier group of people. We'd be more content because we carry so much stress. And that lovely best friend of yours, even that discomfort when you approached him in this way, of course he wants to talk, and that he has questions for you. Like
it's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
And also, like, imagine if your parents, I'm speaking to like everyone on the planet, imagine if your parents had done their work. Like, we would probably be completely different people, right? Or if there are people, because this is what I say all the time, Doug's going to roll his eyes, but like, if we're not doing our own work, then everyone around us has to do our work because they're impacted by our bad mental health or whatever's happening.
I mean, Leah, you're obviously a good example of someone who knows how this process works and what the benefits are of it. But I think once some people start talking, they understand what it really is. And I think therapy has a lot of mysticism around it. I think there's this idea of like this voodoo magic that we do. And, you know, I think we all have different styles as therapists. I tend to be a very direct person. I go right after the jugular because people are paying a lot of money to get better. So if I see patterns, I'm going to address it. But I also, again, have 28-year maintenance people who just really want to check in every week and have someone to talk to. So who really knows their life history. It is amazing, by the way. Like, I'm so grateful for the people that have had kids and they're now graduated from college in the course of my knowing them. You know, I think that's just an incredible honor and privilege to be a part of these people's lives.
You know, as somebody involved in skilled trades and falling in love with the marriage of using your hands and mind, when you get to invest in yourself by getting a counselor or a therapist, someone to help you self-analyze, it's kind of like a hidden hero. It really is, because you wouldn't necessarily think of this category in that aspect, but I do. And the reason I do is because I was mind blown about skilled trades and them being hidden heroes and never understanding them being the foundation of society and how it elevates us. But then my knowledge on the human mind and behavior and the benefits of having that mirror, those counselors, those therapists, that's that other piece. Because we're not just physical. It's not just about our environment. It's about understanding our minds and understanding ourselves.
Yeah. And I think until we really take that time, and I've seen so many people get so uncomfortable the minute they start talking. I've had people walk into my office the first time and just start crying. And they're like, I don't know why I'm crying. But it's the safety piece of what you just described as well. Like when you have that safe space. And I really think this is an important piece as we take a look at like when people choose their therapist, you need a good fit.
Yes.
You need to feel safe with that person. You need to know that they really do see you and care about you. If I hear one more story about therapists who fall asleep on their patients, which drives me absolutely crazy and batty, like why would people go back to that, right? Going back to your comment.
I can't watch therapy shows and movies because the way that therapy and therapists are portrayed in shows, I mean, it's so embarrassing that no wonder
There's some really good ones.
The Sopranos.
Lorraine Bracco on The Sopranos. The guy who, Gabriel Burns, I think it is, that did In Treatment.
I can't watch. I'm too scared. I mean, Esther Perel, I adore, but she's actually like doing the therapy. But I'm always so embarrassed because I feel like if that is what people are seeing of like someone with like questionable ethics or like can't even regulate their own emotions or like super selfish and always talking about themselves or whatever it is, like they have their own agenda, that makes me so embarrassed because I feel like they're incorrectly representing what could be saving somebody's life. That is not what it's like. And if it is, get out and look for somebody different. And exactly what Doug said, you got to find a good fit that you feel like you can, be yourself in front of, that's like rooting for you.
Well, and it's interesting. Of course, I'm out visiting my daughter who works in the film industry out here in Hollywood. And the funny thing is, I think that's entertainment, right? Like they put some of these people on TV for that very, very reason. Although these dramas, again, I'm going to go In Treatment. I'm going to go Lorraine Bracco, which I was just mesmerized by some of what she did. And the people who know how to do the storylines, which makes me honestly wonder, like, has someone done their research in their own therapy on like how that dynamic works? And I've always said to my daughter, like, how do they know? How do the scripts know how to do this work? I remember watching this show. I can't remember what the name of it is. Very, very sad show from the East Coast about, it was so painful, lots of death, fire burned down. I can't remember the name of it. But, people know, when people like describe grief really well in these movies, I'm like, somebody knew this feeling.
Oh,
somebody knew. Yeah. So I just really love when people have done their homework on what's going on. So, yeah. Anyway, we're a little off topic there. Yeah.
But
therapists on TV.
Kind of not, because there's correlations here. The skilled trades are misrepresented in media and film all the time. And
that's right.
Bad. That's why we have such a poor image. So it's actually very relatable that therapists and counselors are more often than not, portrayed in a poor light.
Like stigmatized.
Yes.
It's funny because like I forget this sometimes because if you think about like my world, I am surrounded by people who are very, they easily talk about their emotions. They find the mind-body connection to be very important and real. I'm like, my friends are all into self-development and growth in my world. Like I talk to clients, they're clearly sitting in my office because they believe in it. So sometimes I forget that there's this stigma. And like, I wonder about the trades and how like it feels to even, does it feel like the stigma is coming from the outside or does it feel like it's like within the construction world that people are feeling like they're not enough? Or is it like we're feeling good about what we're doing? This is the foundation of society and we're creating beauty and solid structure for all these people. But then there's like my mom and dad feel a certain way. I mean, I'm curious about what it's like on the inside.
Okay, I'm about to geek out. Here we go.
I love this. Geek away.
So when I entered the electrical field, it was vital in my self-growth. I am so confident. I love myself in a way that I have never loved myself. I am so decisive. I'm so creative and tapped into my innovation and can easily pivot now and accept change now in a way that I never did before. And while I was watching myself kind of blossom, for lack of a better description, through this process of working in the skilled trades, I'm looking around me and I'm like Tigger in the room, okay? And everyone else, the majority, okay, I'm air quoting here, guys, the majority are Eeyores.
I was wondering who you were going to pick.
What is going on? Why is what's happening to me not happening to them? What's going on? Is it because I haven't been doing it as long as them? A part of me is like, no, I don't think that's it, because I also speak to thousands of people in skilled trades because of Sparky Life. And I find that many of the women experience what I'm describing, but the men don't necessarily experience the same thing. And I think this comes down to that there's, number one, the stigma that skilled trades is less than, not important, not a desirable career path. And men who typically, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys are the professionals here.
Well.
Men are supposed to provide their careers. They're the ones that typically bring home the bacon, so to speak. And if they're treated like their jobs or their status, right? Status is also very important typically with males. And again, I'm talking in generalities here. This is not absolute. That if your job is not considered high status, and if you're not considered a provider because your job's not considered high status, and you're looked at as a number or not desirable, that would definitely impact my self-worth and validation and feeling.
Yep.
Now, women in the skilled trade aren't viewed this way. We're very viewed more of a curiosity, a fascination, because we don't have the same societal responsibilities. And it's not that we don't have struggles, but our struggles within the skilled trades are very different than the struggles that the men typically go through.
I would say, go ahead, please, Leah.
I just wanted to mention, I talked about this study before. I read up on, because then now there's this very big difference, right? So being a curious kitty, I've got to understand why. Like this is, and not only why, I want the men to feel what I'm feeling. Like
Absolutely.
This is incredible. Like you need to have this, right? So I touched on this study by Dr. Kelly Lambert, and she talks about rats and Fruit Loops and motivation and how, our motivation comes to us and functions within our body and the brain chemistry of it. And there's this deep connection with building and using your mind, having effort, right? A lot of effort to create something. That being said, where do you think the breakdown is? Well, first of all, do you agree that when you work with your mind and your body, that is going to bring a healthy mindset, great mental health? And let's start there. Like, is that something that you've seen?
Leah, I want to go back to a couple of comments you made. First of all, it would be ignorant not to assume that society has conditioned men and women to be different, right? And, so I think there's a part of this that is very important to recognize that, yes, I think that there are societal influences. I am so hopeful that this is changing. I have a child who's a millennial. I have a child who is Gen Z. I really do hope that this is a changing dynamic and that we see it differently. I'm going to also own, just in general, about this entire recording and episode, that I have such a tremendous bias toward the benefit of having a great electrician in my home. I have this totally different point of view on this. I'll tell you, like my home was built in 1904. I had the entire plaster removed so new electric could be put in, and I watched these brilliant people who knew how to navigate my lathe and my plaster and all of the work that they did. I'm also going to tell you, and I won't use him by name, but there's one of my electricians that if I need something explained to me, because I don't get it. I'm a smart person. I'm a dude. I don't get it. And so I literally will say to him, I remember the day I walked up to him and I said, why can't I have these outlets on my mantle of my fireplace? This guy explained it to me and I just stared at him. I'm like, I don't know how you knew how to talk to me, but I understood everything you just said. And so, Lia, it's like finding a good therapist. I kind of want to say I feel incredibly grateful to have great electricians. So I have a very different point of view on this. And frankly, male, female, I could give a shit.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And so for me, I'm so grateful for people who know this trade, who do it well, who make my home. I just want to say, make my home feel safe for me and my family. Like, I feel like I'm not at risk. By the way, my electricians did say, like, some of your wiring should have caused a fire a long time ago. I'm like,
yeah,
so for me, I have this big bias. I believe you. Like, I really believe that you come across it a lot. But Lia, going to your question about like mind-body connection and, using your hands, et cetera, art therapy is a thing, right? And so people who paint or people who get out of their heads, people who make pottery, people who do electrician work, people who work out, lifting weights, right? Like, I think there's so many ways. And so I 100% support what you said. There is absolutely a mind-body connection related to like using your hands and getting out of your head. And, I train jujitsu to get out of my head, because when you're trying not to be choked or submitted in some way, or, having an arm bar put on you, you are constantly not able to be in your head. You have to pay attention to your body. So that whole idea of getting out of your head and using your hands and being tactile is a really important part of staying healthy. So I'm a huge advocate for it. I love how you describe it.
I also, I have so many thoughts about it. And I also, just like Doug, it's like, this is why it's confusing for me with all of the stigma, because I don't experience that at all. I feel like we would not be able to have what we have without people in the trades. And honestly, we got our kitchen done a year ago. There's not a day that goes by that I don't look at the craftsmanship and the art of it, and how people figured out the physics and the engineering and the perfect slide of the whatever it is. I just feel like that is a kind of brilliance that I don't have. But like, some of my thoughts about the mind and body, like what Doug was saying, it's so real. When you can just get into what you're doing, and some of people's best thinking and brilliant ideas happen when you're working with your hands. There's also this incredible satisfaction I'm picturing, at least when I'm working with my hands, to see something progress, and then the closure and just the wonderful feeling of the finished product of a job well done, and something that works and brings value and joy to people. But I also think that maybe what's missing with the stigma and the self-esteem is that there aren't role models of
Rosie the Riveter,
like really good living. Like, this is a good living. I am so proud of myself. I'm so proud of our team. I'm so proud of the work that we're doing. Just this level of pride and valuing the people on the team, I think that would make such a huge difference when creating a culture of making everyone feel valued and just like a whole person. So in terms of just like feeling good about your work, if you change your narrative about your identity from somebody who might be feeling really, I don't know, trapped in something or judged or not enough. Another reason why therapy can be really helpful, or having a really loving friend or role model, is that idea of an empathic witness to like look at your facts and your whole story and be like, wait, what are you saying about yourself? Like, this is how important you are. This is how beautiful the work you're doing is. And if someone like you, Lia, walks in with this like swagger and pride, I think that is infectious. It's like a contagious energy of, we are so fucking amazing. Like, why? I mean, stigma, I'm telling you, when you're a psychologist and you walk into a cocktail party, it's not exactly like, oh my gosh, people are like, oh, are you psychoanalyzing me?
Oh yeah, right? I bet.
But it's just like, you're in control of that narrative. So like, find your role models and remind yourself that you have choices. that if you can't get out of this in this moment, get into it. Like, figure out a way to make it more fun for yourself, to connect with your coworkers, like you were saying. That makes all the difference in the world, I think.
You know, Leah, going back to your question about, you know, do we think that it's helpful to like use your hands and get out of your mind a bit? One of the things that you've eloquently kind of described in your own process is that you listened to yourself and you found yourself drawn to this discipline and you found yourself drawn to this trade. And I loved when you said, like, is it just that I'm new at this, that I don't have that disconnect from happiness and joy and in my trade and pride in my trade? I think you listen to yourself, and I think you're in the right thing. And so going specifically to your question about like, does this work from the mind-body connection for you? I think you figured out it's a great fit for you. Like you probably have listened to yourself so many times when you're like done a hard day's work, or you figured something out that other people can't, or you got the wire from the upper level to the lower level, which I don't know how that happens. I don't know how a fan gets put in the middle of my room magically. So I look at what you do, and I think you have discovered that use of your hands and that physical kind of exertion that you have is really good for your mental health. And that's what everybody has to kind of think about as they explore this career.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Okay. So you guys said some really amazing, impactful things that I think are imperative to pivoting the construction culture and embracing and elevating it, especially when you touched on having good role models. So it's like a running joke that if you haven't been arrested, if you're not an addict, or if you haven't gotten a divorce, you're not an electrician. That's really shitty.
Oh, that's horrible. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an inspiring self-image if that bar, is real low.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
I noticed that when I give the guys compliments, they have a really hard time taking them and accepting it. So, I don't think they realize how valuable the strength and the mind are and how impressive it is. They act like athletes. The tools are an extension of their body. I'll say to a coworker, I'll be like, "Oh, you're hulking out. And they immediately go to, "Oh, like I'm mindless and dumb." And I'm like, "Do you not know who the Hulk is? He's a scientist. He's a genius that then becomes this ultimate physical strength. Like you're missing the connect here."
Leah, that is exactly what I'm talking about with like the empowered narrative. Like it makes all the difference in the world. You can look at the same exact fact and feel completely inadequate, dumb, never reached my potential, my parents are disappointed, all blah 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 blah. Or you could look at the same exact facts. It's like re-narrating your story has nothing to do with blowing smoke up your own ass or like bending the truth. All the same truths and facts, but seen in a completely different light of like the strength and the genius and the athleticism and the physics and the engineering and the science of like that understanding who you are and what you're doing. You walk differently, you laugh differently, you connect with people differently. If you're not stuck in low self-esteem and like this yucky shame feeling, if you start like being a little more Tigger and a little less Eeyore, right? It's like that, but that's what I'm saying. Like that narrative is infectious. If that's like changing a culture, if people start seeing themselves a little bit differently and show up with swagger and pride, everybody around them is going to feel like, wow, I'm a part of this really amazing group. I love our group. I'm really proud of what we're doing. We rock.
Well, and it's interesting, Leah, when you talk about like that person's immediate kind of reaction to your comment, like you're hulking up, like there was an immediate defensiveness. They automatically assume that you were being critical in some ways, which speaks so much about that person and not you. I mean, I love the comment, by the way, and I love the Hulk in every Avengers movie there is and everything Marvel. And so I'm like totally into it. But I think it speaks so much maybe to some internalized sort of like a belief system that this person that you said that to has. Like, and I
Yes.
think that's part of what we're talking about is like, you know, and everything you said, Talia, about like feel differently, reframe, create a different narrative, feel empowered, and hopefully have gone into this discipline with your eyes wide open about why you're doing it. I think we should all be incredibly happy with our careers. And so I think really being thoughtful about how we spend our time, which you have been, Lia. That's why I'm so loving this. And I love how you talk about being an electrician. I know your story very personally from our own podcast that you were on. And so how you got to this place in your life is so thoughtful and mindful and listening to yourself and really therapeutic for you, clearly. So as you approach these other people about this, you might run into men and women both who have sort of an internalized negativity about themselves in this field, which is too bad.
Yes. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
I bet it does.
I have a doozy of a challenge for you guys. Okay. I'm really going to make you work.
We're ready. We are ready for it.
Okay. So because the majority of skilled trades, and this is specifically in America, I want to be clear on that. I've found out recently that in many countries, they don't have this stigma. Some do, but the majority of the other countries don't. So in America specifically, they're getting it in the media. They're getting it from their parental figures. They're getting it from their outside friends, right? So you have all this negativity telling you your job's useless, you're dumb, you couldn't get anything else, you couldn't do anything else, bottom of the barrel, you must have a drug issue, you must be a criminal. And let me tell you that stigma's there for a reason. And there's a reason why that happened in the skilled trades, why a lot of people with a criminal backgrounds or difficulty with substances walked into the skilled trades. That's a whole separate issue. We'll go into that another time.
We're in.
But that being said, how do you change your story? What tangible acts can I do to combat that amount of negative environment?
I got to tell you something, Lia. One of the first things that comes to mind is kind of what therapy is about. I mean, a lot of people, right?
Oh, look at that. What a great
So you kind of like, you spoke to two therapists about the reality of kind of what we do, because really, Lia, it's like, and I got to tell you something. I was thinking as you were talking, I just want to make one off comment before I answer more. Like one of the things I wonder about is how customers treat people who come into their homes. Like I come in and I am overwhelmed and I am intimidated and I don't know what I'm doing. And so I look at these people like the magicians that know what they're doing that I don't know. So I'm like, why are you doing that? Why are you creating a new circuit breaker for me? Why are you doing this? I don't know. Like I'm fascinated with the whole piece of it that you know that I don't know, similar to therapy. I know what this looks like. I know what I'm doing after 28 years. I never fear what comes into my office. But going specifically to your question, like how do people change that experience that they're having? Of course, people come to therapy. And one of the first questions I ask is like, what brings you here? Like, what are you hoping to achieve by this experience? And Lia, 100% of the time, there's going to be some sort of transition that people are looking to make, or some sort of reframe, or some sort of way that they can take all of that experience and do it differently. So I would encourage people to really take a look. I'm someone who's very psychodynamic in my theoretical framework. So I find myself really wanting to take a look at every factor of their lives. I go back to family of origin, like what were your models? What were your learnings? What were your experiences? Do you have any trauma in your life that might be impacting how you feel about this? And so taking a look at all the variables becomes a part of it, but then really getting to a place where you can find yourself looking at alternative ways of thinking, being, et cetera. But I always tell people the goal of therapy is to live an honest life. And so people have to really kind of dig deep and get in touch with what's honest and true and authentic for them. And when people do that, Lia, I mean, that's where that gold is for people to say, I am living my best life. I am living my honest life. And by the way, electrician work is not going to be for everybody, as you know.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
Right? So there's a part of me that says, move on if this is not the right field. But frankly, a lot of therapists should move on from this field. You know, there's people in every field that should not be in their circumstance. And so going back to it, like, feel pride about this and get yourself to a place where you've been able to really take a look at, like, why am I doing this? Is this the right thing for me? Am I replenished by it? So it's really about digging deep into those internalized negative messages or distorted messages, I might call them, about why people experience what they do. I love that you love that word, distorted.
I do.
Yeah. Because it's a big piece of our experience growing up, right?
Yes.
I love what you said, Doug. I always do, you know. And we got in trouble at the very beginning of our podcast. Our initial producer would be like, let me guess, you agree with everything Doug said.
Why would you not?
That's not interesting at all. Like, and so, but really, like, I'm thinking about that narrative piece that is so important. Like, and I think that people don't even realize how much they get themselves into this negative groove of how they're thinking about themselves, how they're telling the story of their own life, how they got there. Where it's like, if your story is one of, I'm stuck, I couldn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, I'm a disappointment, right? And you look at all of those same factors and you start to talk to yourself a little differently and you start to tell your story a little differently, right? Because there's always the Eeyore vibe also is a little bit maybe of the victim, a little bit of the grass is always greener on the other side. Other people are making more money or they have these high power, whatever it is. But if you start to even shift the dynamic of like looking at that of like, oh, okay, so I get to work with my hands, listen to music, maybe like be outside in the fresh air. This affords me, like, I'm getting my outside time, I'm getting my exercise. Because of this paycheck, I get to do A, B, and C. Because of this work I'm in, these are the flexibilities that I have. This is how I'm contributing to the world. And if you're feeling like it's a little empty or you don't want to be the behind the scenes person, I promise you that the relationships that you're creating with the people around you on your team or the people that you're doing jobs for, we are so incredibly grateful. We want those relationships. We value you. We think you're brilliant. We don't understand how you're doing what you're doing. We can't do it. So if you're walking in to any scenario with an assumption that people are seeing you a certain way, there's this self-fulfilling prophecy thing that happens where like if you walk in and you're looking down and you're kind of like, oh, how nice for you that you think I'm this and that. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like you could walk in standing really tall, assuming that whomever you're working for is so incredibly grateful that you are there, so lucky, so happy. You're doing something we don't know how to do. You're solving our problems. You're fixing issues we can't fix, you know, then all of a sudden there's a different energy. You're starting to like make a connection with a human that really values you. And then you start to have a different kind of self-esteem. So even just to like understand who I am and what I'm contributing and how I'm capable of making this a better environment, that might be your little part in it.
I also want to add something to this that's really important. As we're talking about this, it dawns on me that as a gay man or as a person who has survived what you have, Lia, and you know the work that you do, and Talia, your own personal experiences, one of the things that we have to do is stand up for ourselves. And again, like hold ourselves, you know, accountable for having good boundaries and expecting to be treated well. And so I find myself when you talk about family or you talk about I bring up customers, or you talk about the media and the social, you know, impact of like what we've internalized about our trade or our jobs, regardless of what we do. If somebody tries to diminish us, if somebody talks down to us, we have to confront that. We have to address it directly so that we don't let that, you know, permeate our soul and our being. And so I would say that the other piece of this is when family starts to diminish, or somebody starts to have a reaction about, you know, hulking out or whatever, or, you know, some customer starts treating you poorly or doesn't I don't know what. There could be so many ways that people talk down to people. You have to say, so I want to clarify what the communication needs are for me, and really stand up for yourself and tell people, I do not like how you're responding to me. I'm really proud of what I am. I'm proud of what I do. And you have to stand up for yourself and address those things, because if someone treats you badly, if those messages come at you, and again, I can speak to so many things, whether it's about being women as you are, or whether it's about being gay as I am, like we have to be able to say that's not acceptable to treat me that way.
Yes.
So part of it is expecting the world to treat you in a positive way too. And standing up for yourself is so golden when it comes to feeling good about yourself.
Yes, yes. Well, this unlocks many things. That's why there's always this kind of animosity towards engineers, because many a time the engineers are college grads who have never picked up a tool, and they primarily operate off of these computer programs. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen an electrician tell an engineer, this is not going to work. And the engineer completely disregard what the electrician is telling him, because he feels he's a college grad, it works in his program, maybe it worked before on another site, and this little electrician doesn't know what they're talking about. And I've also seen this in the medical field, where nurses will go to a physician and say, hey, we should actually do this, and the physician dismiss. And here is the key. Whenever someone is doing the activity over and over and over and over and over and over in many different situations, they're the ones that are going to have a better perspective on what will, quote, work or not work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So really great leaders or really great teams, I find, are the people that will listen to the person on the ground, so to speak, right? And heed or work with what they're telling them.
Which makes total sense.
And when I'm picturing, is that what you're seeing? Is there some sort of less than, greater than hierarchy that comes out? But what you're suggesting is that it's much more collaborative, and that people honor each other's lived experience.
I mean, Lia, you're doing the work in this particular situation. By the way, the mother of my children, who's a nurse, would really love that comment that you made about the healthcare industry. And so, you know, I'm going to make sure she listens to this. But I will tell you, I think this is going back to what I said. Like, you should expect to be talked to in a way that is respectful and regarding of what your strength is and your skill is. It goes back to my electricians. Like, I waive all knowledge of everything. Like, please tell me why that can't happen. You know, in whatever way. Like, I'm curious about it. Like, and I admit that I'm someone who wants to know how things work. So I'm, you know, and I think it's so interesting how a house is wired, and electricity is just fascinating to me. So I ask questions. But if somebody is disregarding you, if an engineer is disregarding kind of what your bottom line is, you are the people making it happen. So it is collaborative. It has to be collaborative. And I am assuming that you have found people that you enjoy working with as well, which brings me to, like, you know, surround yourself with those people who regard and respect and honor what it is that you bring to that table, and do regard the collaborative effort.
Yes.
So
I would love to hear you both give an idea on how to approach regarding soft skills, because here's another toxic cultural construction thing that I come up against constantly. There's this idea that, well, I need to make it hard for you. I worked on a construction site with no boots. Bah, safety? I didn't do safety. I was up there and never tied off. And there's this mentality that they get from an imperial structure and this military mindset without the key, right? So, like, yes, it's important to create struggle, but you don't beat someone down and watch in amusement and let them figure out how to handle it. You're supposed to create a struggle which you try to guide them for themselves to find a solution. And then if they need a tap in, if they need a guidance, you step in and help to guide them until you can get them to a position where they're in a struggle themselves and they can figure it out. And the guys don't see this. The men in particular are very fond of like hazing or really beating on the apprentices or each other.
Lia, you know, one of the things that Talia and I do in our work is obviously we provide scripts for people. We provide communication strategies. And I'll tell you something, immediately I find myself thinking, if I were in that situation, I would probably say, so I don't find that approach helpful. What will work for me to be most successful here is if you do not diminish me, if you do not make this harder for me. What is going to be helpful for me is if we work together, and if I need something, I can ask you, are you available for that? Like, I would just call it out. I would say, that's not helpful for me. That doesn't feel like the most supportive environment. And if they say, well, it doesn't matter because I went through it as well. Well, you're not hearing me. And I realize that, you know, I'm a dude who feels very comfortable at 6 foot. And, you know, with the build that I have, I'm very comfortable approaching people and saying, you know, that's not how it's going to work for me. Right. Right. But women need to feel that same empowerment. And I really think that's it. Like, I think you should walk in. By the way, Lia, you're so brilliant and so fucking articulate about how you express yourself. So I find myself thinking everyone should be very careful if they approach you that way, because I think you can hold your own and I think you can take care of yourself and you are a survivor. So I find myself thinking, if you're working with Lia, take heed. Like, she's going to walk in and say, okay, that's not helpful for me. Like, we have to talk about how someone else is. Like, I think the general communication strategy, let somebody know how their behavior is impacting you. So that's not helpful, dude. What would be helpful for me in working together is this.
I mean, what I'm picturing, and of course, I don't know because I've never done a lick of a trade in my life. But I think we
need to, Talia. I think you and I should join. We should go to Lia's work site and just learn.
Really
hard hat.
A hard hat. Like, no, but what I was going to say is, like, I cannot picture a scenario where if there's a culture of like eating your young, which I talked to so many nurses who experience that same thing, that like the hazing process. And by the time they become the leaders, they also have this feeling of like, well, nobody helped me when I was. So it's like a perpetuating culture. But I like can't imagine a scenario, if that's the culture, if you're walking into a scenario like that, that you could be like, I would prefer that you treat me like this, right? First day on the job, or for, you know, and especially as a woman. And I mean, I'm also picturing like I don't know, especially as a woman, as a man or a woman walking into a scenario where the culture is established. How do you even break that culture down to like offer a new way of being in the world? I mean, I'm trying to think of like ways to disarm that system. And maybe it's about trust, or maybe it's just about like, I have a lot of integrity in my brand. Like, I am my brand. I take my work very seriously. You don't need to haze me in order to help me achieve. Like, I'm a really good worker. I'm taking this seriously. I do need some guidance, or I would like some collaboration as I'm getting, you know, I don't know, what do you call it? Like, as I'm getting my legs under me, as I'm figuring this out, because I care about this work a lot. I really want to do well. So I need to know that if I'm struggling, I can just ask you how to do the thing without a lot of drama.
Well, and I'm still going to say that it's about that, though. It's about, I think it's very disarming to let somebody know. So that behavior is not helpful for me. Like, I think just calling it out is really disarming. I also want to remind everybody that sort of bravado really has no place in our world, period. No place in our world, period. And so I think there's a part of this, and I've said this to you before, Lia, we as men need to stand up to other men who treat anybody in a diminishing sort of way and stand up for what's right. It is never helpful to haze. It is never helpful to have somebody struggle. Like, that's not the point. What we want to do is teach. Like, if my supervisor, when I was becoming a clinician, had said, I'm going to throw you out to the dogs because that's how it worked for me, and I'm going to let you fail, and I'm going to let you flounder, and I'm going to let you say stupid things to a patient, that frankly, that's careless. But it's careless in your profession too. Like, I'm aware that if I saw in my home somebody treating my electricians poorly and being like, go ahead, try to figure it out, I'd be like, okay, get out of my house. I want a collaborative, I want a helpful environment. So everybody has to do that. But I think it's disarming. I do, to go up to a dude who's doing this and just say, so that's not helpful for me. And that's not how it's going to work.
But it's also talking up a ladder. It's like a person talking maybe like to their boss. And this is what gets complicated, is that you need to know how to be in a hierarchy, but also push the trust, the empathy, like the soft skills of building good relationships and building good work culture are like trust, empathy, support, collaboration. So like if you're showing up as somebody who cares about other humans, wants to help, like maybe you're modeling it. Like maybe instead of, speaking to your boss or in a certain way or other people, you're just like modeling what it looks like to show up, do good work, be generous with your advice or your help or your collaboration, encouragement. And those soft skills are also contagious. And then people start to feel better about themselves, and then they feel a little more generous to like maybe help out a fellow worker or, throw a nice word in or, whatever that is. And so like,
I don't know, Leah, the culture necessarily or how some of this, kind of comes together when you're on a work site. But I also think that it's fair if you can't do that. I tend to be a confrontational person and I'm good with words. And so I can articulate myself calmly and clearly in a stressful circumstance most of the time, not always, for anybody who's been a victim of my anger. But I will tell you that, I think it's okay also to say, can I see you for a second? Like if there's a group of people that this is happening in front of, like, I think that's the other piece, is that this person might be like creating his alpha territory by doing this, he or she. And I think it's okay to say, can I see you for a second privately? And really address it privately to not embarrass that person or diminish them or emasculate them in a way, not that they don't deserve to be emasculated. But I think there's a part of this that I think taking them aside and having a respectful but direct and clear conversation about what the expectations are moving forward, I think that's incredibly disarming. I think people will gain overall a respect from people who stand up for themselves and create that sort of understanding from the get-go.
That's very helpful. It's very clear, because when the men on site here stand up for themselves, the action then that I see is, don't fucking talk to me that way. Who the hell do you think you're like? That's not standing up for yourself.
It's not at all. It's getting defensive. It's insecurity, which I just want to also point out, like anybody who does this sort of hazing or bullying or dominating or controlling or diminishing of the other person, there's some stuff and they need a therapist. So, I mean, I'm just going to say, like, remember, that's always what that's what I always tell people. Like, remember when somebody does this sort of thing, like anybody who wants someone else to not be as good as they can be in this world has issues they need to talk about in therapy and figure out why they would possibly not want someone to be the best people they can be in this life.
Yes. That's awesome. I am very hopeful that the coworkers and guys on site are going to heed some of this information.
And if not, and you're struggling with it, please let us know at We're Not Fine, and we'll help you figure this out.
Yeah, there you go. Now I'm going to flip the script here and talk about the ladies. There's a little thing, it's different, but same type of issue with the gals. And what it is a lot of the ladies start to go on, I have to keep proving myself on every single crew, and the amount of work I put in is never appreciated. And, why would I give it 110% if I'm going to be treated this way? I see a lot of behaviors from the women that remind me of victim mentality. Like, woe is me, I'm a woman, it's so hard. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there isn't struggle for the females. There clearly is. Okay. Yeah. But it's about your approach. The women I see take action like this and think like this, things don't tend to go well for them, and they don't last long in the skilled trade. What are some activities, mindsets, behaviors you would recommend for the women in the skilled trades that validate. Yeah, it's hard. Everything they say is true. It's not like they're, pulling it out of the ass.
Right.
But to have this, it's their fault that I'm not succeeding.
I mean, I have so do you, Doug, I know, but like I have a handful of women orthopedic surgeons in my practice. And Leah, word for word, that is their experience as well. And I think maybe in a lot of typically male dominated fields, it is this feeling of like, I'm always having to prove myself. I have to work twice as hard and be twice as perfect. But the choices then in that moment are either to say, I give up. I don't want to work twice as hard. I don't want to always be proving myself. Or you realize that you are an exception to the rule, that you are incredibly special, that people are watching you in a way they might not be watching others. Others might be, slipping between the cracks, but you are doing something amazing. You are swimming upstream. People are paying attention. It's an opportunity to take your brand and your work very seriously. So if you choose not to give up, then that means that you are willing to put everything you have into showing people your brilliance, your hard work, your grit, and people will notice. It's not like people won't notice. If they're expecting this level, like low level, whatever, because they're looking at you and making assumptions, and you knock it out of the park, it's going to be shock and awe, and they will be really surprised. People are watching, people are noticing. Like, don't give up. Just really stand up tall. You are your brand. People will remember your name. That's what I
will say, I will say that I'm always careful not to speak for women or to understand at all what that experience is, because I think that would be a horrible error. But I also want to say that there is a really clear bottom line for me here, and that, regardless of gender, we are all equal human beings. So I kind of come from this perspective, but we have to remember this. Women are not less than. Women are not gay people are not less than, Black people or BIPOC people are not less than. And so we have a world where I so believe in human equality. And so I would encourage people to take a look at where those internalized negative messages are, or again, distorted messages about like, don't deserve to be here, don't deserve to be treated well, don't deserve, to have equal standing as a female in that environment, specific to your question. And I think we have to take a look at where those negative, insecure moments come from, and really challenge those. So I would say, like anything, like it's almost like junior high. I always tell junior high people who are struggling, like, just fucking be yourself. It is the goal. And it's a really hard concept when people are judging or bullying or seeing you as less than. But we all have to remember, we deserve to be anywhere in this world that someone else is. We deserve to be able to have a wedding cake made by the same people. We deserve to have Supreme Court recently, of course, did a very homophobic and distorted and discriminatory agreement about, you can turn away people because of their love. Thank you for the rolling of the eyes, Leah. And so as we're talking about, gay clubs in West Hollywood, the thing that I'm struck by about this is, I just think that that's what has to happen. We have to take a look at our insecurities. And I will tell you, it's kind of like fighting as a training for jujitsu for me. Like, I think a lot of people feel like, okay, how do gay people feel comfortable doing that? Because I feel comfortable doing it, and I'm as equally able to be there, and I go there for the same reason as everybody else does, right? And so I think there's a part of this that every woman who feels that way, who does not feel comfortable, has to remember what those internalized messages are and really challenge those. And I'm not trying to diminish the incredibly powerful socialization that has been brought apart. But these men who might treat women in a certain way have to fucking get their shit together and get their head out of their ass and start remembering that everybody is a human being worthy of that, deserving of respect.
I love it.
Good. Well, and Leah, I guess you got to go back to role models. You are a role model here. Like, I have no question that when you walk into a workplace that you deserve to be treated with the same regard as anybody else. So I'm loving that you are paving the way in even this conversation, the podcast that you have. You are paving the way for other women to feel empowered and confident moving into this discipline.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My goal is to change the culture because I find such value in skilled trades, and I want to see the men and the women and any cultural background that chooses to be in skilled trades
Yeah.
be as successful and fulfilled as I have experienced, and more so. Go to the stars, go to the moon,
Ah,
whatever
I love
floats your
it.
boat.
I love it. And yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about with role models, right? Like that is changing the culture. It's introducing a narrative that is just as real as any other narrative, but will lead you to self-esteem, self-worth, satisfaction, a beautiful life. Then you can picture this incredible future. Like
Yeah.
everything changes when you change your narrative about who you are, what you're contributing, what your future is going to look like.
Well, and
Yes.
Leah, going back to your very, very simplistic comment, I mean, it came out of your mouth so easily to reach for the stars and go for your dreams. I think we as a culture do not encourage people to really listen deeply. And our podcast, obviously, Talia, is about relationships, right? Like, I think people really have to take a deep dive into themselves to understand, like, what do you really want? And then you have to make a fucking good choice about it, right? Like, listen to that
Yes.
chemistry, right? So I find myself thinking that shooting for the stars means that you're willing to take a look at yourself, take risks, be honest with yourself, be honest with others, and live an honest life. It really is the goal of therapy. It's the goal of living.
Yes.
As all of you just witnessed, that was an amazing episode with Lia on her episode of My Sparky Life that Talia and I were so graciously honored to be a part of. I will tell you something. What I find about Lia that is so amazing, she is so articulate, so smart, so compassionate, so wise in her understanding of dynamics, and patient and graceful about that. But the one thing that I would say is she's so honest and authentic, right? Like she can really just talk about what her experience is. And I love it so much. So I hope everybody found that as well about her. I really want to say too that the reason we do all of this, right? The reason we're doing the We're Not Fine podcast is to increase awareness of mental health, reduce stigma, become available. I did offer so many people at the pool yesterday, like have questions, please let us know what they are. We'll answer any of them because there were people right there. I actually met a potential guest who I think will be really great. I sometimes pick guests that will not be great, but this one will be great. But
it depends on how late into the evening it is. Then we get more and more guest opportunities.
I'm not going to go into that.
Well, then let me continue to say, not only is Lia brilliant and wise and compassionate, but she is literally trying to change the culture around the trades. And it's an incredibly powerful role to have in this world where people have a very fixed mindset about who they are, what that looks like. And if anyone can do it, Lia can.
Well, and I think what I was saying before I got distracted in my Key West brain is that I think the way that we get beyond some of these biases and prejudices and gender inequities and every other inequity there is, race inequities, is by having these conversations. So I'm so grateful that she was on ours talking about something important, and we've been able to do that as well. And as all of our viewers know, you and I will continue this dialogue and make sure that we continue to talk about those really, really tough topics. That's to really increase awareness and educate people on these things that are happening. Because I think it evokes thoughtfulness, right? Like it evokes people to think about, like, what are my own thoughts on this and what do I carry with me? It's one of the best things about this process.
And that's why we're loving it so much. And if you haven't hopped on our we'renotfine.com, we have a fresh new look, and there are some potential secrets on there that you might want to hop on. We are going to have an email list, and I mean, we do have an email list. Join it. It's brand new for us. It only took us a year, and we have so many fun things up and coming. We want you to be the first to know. Find us on social media. Doug has posted many pictures of his conch shell at Douglas L. Jensen EN. Oh my. And I'm Dr. Talia Jackson. And then it's We're Not Fine Pod. What else? What else, Doug?
Really, make sure to go to we'renotfine.com to not only do your email subscription. Sorry for the airplane.
Oh, we can't even hear it.
You can't hear in the airplane over me?
The only thing I can hear is your black eye.
It looks horrible. I'm just going to wear a patch today.
You should.
So the other thing, though, please feel free to ask any questions. You know, one of the things that I've really been loving about this is that people can ask anything anonymously, bring up a topic that's really hard for them. Like if they just don't have an access to a mental health therapist and they would like to talk to us while we're not going to be therapists, you can ask us absolutely anything. And those are
our mailbags.
Those are our mailbags. Absolutely.
And we make a whole theme around it to answer your beautiful burning questions. And we love you guys. Stay warm or cool. And we'll talk to you next week.
I'm going to stay warm for a good couple days.
And then you're back to the icy tundra. See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.